Oh my goodness. My goodness. All right. Well, it's been that kind of day, so we'll see what we can get done here, folks. So it doesn't appear that we have a quorum, but that I believe we can still meet and discuss things. We just can't vote on things.
Right. That's
Okay.
true. So like if you had minutes or something from the last meeting, you couldn't approve them
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
tonight or
Which
something
is
like that.
what we normally do. So I think we can listen and discuss, but not decide. So let's listen and discuss by, we'll call the meeting to order. The first agenda item is approval of the previous minutes, which we will not do. I'll also state, and I'm going to paraphrase because I don't know this little speech by heart, but we are meeting tonight by, via Zoom by permission of and by order of the governor because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in order to keep town business going and to keep meetings going, to keep them open and to the public, we can meet by this means by Zoom as opposed to meeting in person. That's my best paraphrasing summary of why we're meeting in this format. So we're going to skip the agenda item of approval of the minutes, and we'll go right to open time for the public. And we do have a guest and a member of the select board in Chris Falls. And I don't see any other members of the public. Shelley will be jumping right to you shortly. Next person on the agenda. But Chris, if you're willing to share with folks, you and I spoke, but everyone else doesn't know what's going on. So if you would please update us.
Good. Thanks, Jim. I really appreciate your guys letting me pop in for a few minutes tonight. I know you've got a busy agenda, so I won't take but maybe 5 minutes here. And I think I'm wearing probably 3 different hats tonight. Select board is one, but actually I'm wearing the grant committee hat and the master plan hat. So basically, I wanted to bring to your attention, I passed the information on to Jim. There is a grant opportunity in front of us right now through the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, PVPC. Every year they come out with what they call a DLTA grant. And this is basically, it's a funny name, but it stands for District Local Technical Assistance. And it's not monetary usually, it's basically technical assistance. But they have applications that they just started opening their round of grant applications last week. Actually they had a deadline of this coming Friday the 5th for some, like literally barely 10 days. They've now extended that until the 12th. So we've got a little bit longer time. But they basically are the group that we used to have a consultant work with us on the master plan update last year. For those of you who remember the community survey, and Jim was intimately involved in that, in the community engagement survey, we got that together basically through the help of a PVPC consultant. So there is a grant opportunity out there, and I really thought that this was something that the Housing Authority could think about and maybe apply for. It's really, I think, in your bailiwick. The application itself is not very onerous whatsoever. It's no more than maximum 2 pages of narrative about your goals and what you want to achieve, and that's about it. And it just has to be signed off on by either the chair of the planning board or the chair of the select board. And unfortunately, the planning board is not going to be meeting this week. They canceled their meeting. So they won't be meeting before the deadline, and they, like some of the committees, have set dates, and they really don't vary that much. But we do have a select board meeting ahead of time, so before the deadline, so we could probably get it passed by the select board. But basically, part of my thought was looking at some of the things that came up in the community survey, in the old master plan that we did. You all have a housing plan that dates from 2010, I believe, and it's based on demographics and stuff from the 2000 census, I'm pretty sure. I haven't read it probably in over a year now. I read it when I first got onto the master plan committee, but it's, I'm sure, old data, I mean, no matter what. And so I'm wondering if maybe some technical assistance could be helpful to work with you all to possibly update that housing plan, if that's something you think is a priority, and kind of do maybe more of an in-depth, housing needs analysis kind of thing, marrying it with some of the results of the community survey. Just a couple of things that come to my mind from that is that there was not a big desire from the residents that responded to the community survey about having apartments or about having smaller lot sizes, I think, or kind of accessory apartments. It didn't seem to be as big a priority right now as it was last year. This is last year's thing that we did, Jim. So this is what we did, and really all it is this cover sheet, but then the letter that you just passed up on the first page, that is the sum total of the application that we did last year for the master plan consultant. So it really is only a page, no more than two, of kind of putting some thoughts together. It might include things like going further in looking at, housing trust, or the whole inclusionary bylaw, or the idea of a senior overlay district. I know some towns, Hatfield and Hadley and a few others, have done some of those things. It could kind of combine any of that above. So I just wanted to present it to you and let you know that it's out there. And unfortunately, it is a short turnaround, but we've got time to pull it together, because it really is. It's not even a budget. It's just this amount.
Right.
And that's it. So I just wanted to throw it out there, and knowing you've got a guest tonight, you may have some further thoughts.
Right. I'm wondering if Shelley would, has any thoughts about this and might advise us. And certainly I can also share, Chris. First of all, Chris, thanks I know this was last minute, but I appreciate you sharing this with us. And I wish we had more time. I was kind of frustrated today in trying to get this together, but we're here now and we've gotten this far.
Sure.
I guess, my question would be, Chris, I really appreciate this application from last year, because I think much of it does come through the planning board, and Paul, the chair, Paul Deeman, was involved. And I'm just a little bit worried that if we do this, for example, through the select board, that the optics are going to appear that we're trying to do an end around the planning board. And I certainly don't want to communicate that. I want to collaborate deeply with them.
Yeah.
We have this issue of this deadline.
Right. Yeah. No, and I think I would recommend, we actually, it was kind of by default that we went to planning board. We would have normally gone to the select board last year. And I think it was a timing issue also with them that led us to the planning board instead, because planning board, it was one of the, the key committees in the master plan, but we could have easily done the select board as well. So I hear what you're saying, and I think it probably would take an email to say, hey, look, Paul, we're thinking of applying for this. Would you be willing to sign off on it, even, in your role as the chair, without having a meeting on that? And I don't know if he would be willing. But
that was going to be my follow-up question is that even legal if Paul says, yeah, I like this idea, we'll work with you on this, we'll take them input, can he do that without a vote of the planning board? Can he just sign off on it?
Certainly, I don't know if you can or can't. It's more certainly best practice would be to have a vote from the entire committee rather than the chair, although following that, he could possibly go back on the next scheduled meeting and just ask that they ratify it, I suppose. But it would be better if they had a meeting, but unfortunately they canceled the one that they have for Wednesday night. So I think we could work it. Cindy's on the planning board too, so we could do a little chit chat and figure out how to approach that. But I wouldn't let that stop you, I guess.
Chris, but if you said you were initially going to go to the select board, but they weren't meeting, so you deferred to the planning board, is that what you said before?
That's what I remember we did last time, yeah.
So this isn't like we're going to ask Paul to make the decision. We want to inform the planning board, like Paul or Cindy or whomever. But if the select board can make the decision and it's about updating a study that already exists.
Yeah.
I don't know that we need the planning board's approval to move ahead with a housing study.
To your point, Janet, I guess it's really talks about the scope of what we are applying for in this grant. If it's strictly to update the housing action plan that's 10 years old, I agree with you. If we're talking about, help with, consultation on zoning changes, for example, and looking at, density, zoning changes or senior zoning changes, because then I think we kind of do need the housing planning boards.
Mhm.
Okay.
So what could we really pull off in a week? I mean, I
Right.
think stepping up to try to update the plan is achievable. Putting our ideas together and getting them to anybody by the 12th is, beyond that scope. I don't know how much money is in this, Chris.
There is, that's the thing, is they take a look at what you're trying to do and they put a value. It's basically on their consultants. So they put a value on it and say, we're going to give you this consultant who's going to spend this much time. And for example, we got about, I think it was around $7,000 for the master plan update. And so that took us from like February, March, say, until December. And then it was over. So this would end in December, no matter what. But you don't actually, no money changes hands. It's basically they keep track of the consultant's time and
Right.
figure that out on their end somehow. I think, right now we definitely don't have anything on paper to circulate, but I think even if you had a draft of something in, early next week or something to run by Paul, whether he would be willing to just send it out to his committee members by email and just let them know about it.
Right.
Again, it can be either person. It doesn't have to be planning board. It's just that obviously housing and bylaw kinds of stuff probably ties in closer to them than it does select board.
Maybe, Chris, maybe the scope of what our application here for DLTA has to do with the degree that the planning board is, can, collaborate with us. Minimally, we want to go to update the housing action plan, which to Janet's point, we don't need the planning boards. But if we want to include, looking at zoning changes and consultation on that, then it gets bigger. And so I can, certainly work with Paul and see where he's at and how he wants to do it, or to the degree that he's comfortable and he feels he legally can or whatever. And then that will affect the application. I mean, what do folks think of that?
Yeah, and don't forget too that probably further down the line, as you got into more the nitty gritty of, say, an overlay district, or revising or looking at the inclusionary bylaw that's already on the books that hasn't been used or isn't useful, whatever the issue is, I don't know, but you could do like a joint meeting with planning board, for example, and have those kind of discussions as you go.
Well, right. That would be my intent if we're going to start. Obviously we need their consultation and assistance. It'd be several joint meetings.
Yeah, but I think you've already presented a few of those ideas. You've gone before them and indicated the kinds of things that you're interested in doing. So this wouldn't be a big surprise, I don't think. But I think it's it would be good just to have a phone call or an email with Paul and just sort of say, hey, this is what we'd like to do. Any issues you have here, except we know that now you won't have a meeting before the deadline.
Right. So let's do that. I'll reach out to Paul, and I may reach out to you, Chris, to help. But I'm mindful of the time, and I'm mindful that Shelley has graciously agreed to join us at this late hour. And I don't.
That's fine.
I really want to.
That's fine.
Honor her work and her willingness to meet us at this hour. So I'm going to move this
absolutely.
along.
Absolutely. And I think, like you say, she may have some good points to add to what you were just talking about. One last thing, I think the person at PVPC you were just talking about, Catherine, that you had on the phone, I believe she was involved in that first housing plan.
Okay. Yeah, she called me back and she gave me some opportunities to call her tomorrow too. So my problem is I have to work tomorrow. So
okay.
I have to be very careful about separating my times. I do it during breaks. You go get that. Yeah.
Right. All right. I'll leave you guys. Thank you very much. Have a good meeting.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate your attention to this.
Bye-bye.
All right. Let's
Jim, I did reach out to Chuck to see if he could join us and make a quorum, but he said he unfortunately could not.
Okay.
But it was worth a shot.
All right. Well, we're going to do our best here. Thank you, Janet. I appreciate that. So let me get myself back to being oriented here. Let's see. Okay, well, I'm going to jump right to Shelley. I'm not finding my agenda. I got too many screens open here, but I'm assuming that's next on the agenda, and I want it to be anyhow because you've been great. I appreciate your patience, but the limited number of members here tonight would love to hear your what you have to educate us on regarding the proceeding, and I appreciate you listening to what we were just talking about. Maybe that informs what you want to tell us.
Yes. So I am going to keep my screen off just because I am trying to keep Ruby calm, and so I'm bouncing her. But you will hear her a little bit.
It's very key.
Hopefully not too bad. So I'm
If
wondering,
you can help us make a quorum, we're happy to have her with us.
can I share my screen? Is that set up? Okay, it looks like maybe it is.
You have to read this. I don't know if you've seen the meme yet, and especially if you haven't read it. But
Okay, can you see that?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we're good.
So, so just so that if you're not familiar with MHP, we are a quasi-state agency in Massachusetts, and our goal is really to support the increase of affordable housing across the state. And we have 4 legs to our stool. So community assistance is the team that I'm a part of, and we've lent for the development of affordable housing. We've lent over $1 billion that has supported over 22 units of housing. Our niche is really affordable rental housing. We have the One Mortgage program, which is the most affordable mortgage for households earning up to 100% of the area median income in the state. And we have the Center for Housing Data, which are a team of people that are collecting and analyzing data and sharing that across the state to help inform housing policy. So community assistance, we do all kinds of trainings. We do technical assistance with local communities as well as housing authorities and nonprofits. And my work is really focusing on affordable housing trusts. So helping communities create trust, but also those that have them, help them to build them to be more effective tools in the local community. So tonight I wanted to go a little bit over what is a housing trust, specifically under the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust statute. A little bit into operations and best practices, just what we're seeing around the state, and then talk a little bit about eligible activities, the kinds of things that your housing trust could fund or participate in. So one, just overall, it's the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Fund is organized, is organized under,
It's okay, Shelley. You can't control these things.
it's organized under Chapter 44, Section 55C. It is a public entity. It's created by your local legislative board with a majority vote. The purpose is to create and preserve affordable housing, and it's led by a local board of trustees that's appointed by your select board. The note on the bottom is just that because it is a municipal entity, so like your other boards, it's subject to public procurement, designer selection, conflict of interest, public meeting laws. Just an overview of the process. So starting in the top left, it's you determine whether you're going to, I should have changed that to a bylaw since you're a town, whether you're going to write a bylaw or whether you're just going to pass a statute as it's written, which some communities do. Then your legislative body accepts the bylaw or the statute. It's submitted to the AG's office within 30 days. Then you're able to establish your board of trustees, record a declaration of trust. So the registry allows this to be filed as a standalone document, not attached to a property, to land or a building. And so a lot of trusts will file it immediately just to establish the authority of the trust. And then you set up a trust fund account. This is generally through your municipal treasurer. And then the Navy, I'm going to talk about. Those are our suggestions.
So Shelley, I'm sorry, did you say it needs to be approved by a town meeting?
It's the, yes,
Yeah.
town meeting, yes.
Yeah.
Majority vote.
Yep.
Just majority vote, not super majority.
Exactly, just majority vote, yep. So really broadly, a housing trust can address your local affordable housing needs, support local control of housing initiatives. The trust can actually engage in real estate activity, buying and selling property if it wants. And if the trust has funds in its account, the trust can make timely decisions because the trust doesn't have to go to town meeting like your community preservation committee does. And then the trust can collect funds from a variety of sources. CPA is just one possibility. The statute calls for a minimum of 5 trustees. It must include a member of your select board. The other members, well, all the members are appointed by the select board. The statute says 2-year terms, and most communities stagger that, as we do in most boards and nonprofits, just so not everyone turns over at the same time. And then because it's a municipal entity, trustees are public agents, special municipal employees. The statute outlines a variety of different powers that are given to the trust members, and it does say that the community can add to these powers as long as in keeping with the statute. And I was just going to point out a couple different communities, a little bit of how they've created their trust and structured it. The town of Brewster created their trust just a couple of years ago in 2018. They actually had an existing affordable housing fund. They dissolved that to create this municipal affordable housing trust fund. At the time, they transferred $80,000 to this new entity. And in their initial year or so, they developed a mission statement and they created goals with priority initiatives. And they did this through a community process of housing forum and different meetings involving the community so that it was collaborative and that the community could be engaged in their process.
That's really interesting. So they had a housing trust, but they changed it to a municipal housing trust, and I'm not sure the difference.
So they had just a fund where they were putting some money that for affordable housing, but it didn't have the flexibility that a municipal affordable housing trust had. So they saw the benefit in shutting down the old limited and then creating this new one. Yes.
And so even though you say a member of 5, this has 7. So
the statute, yes. So
no less than 5. Okay.
Yep. So I think that it's a minimum of 5.
Yep.
And I think that if I did count up all the trusts that we know of, that I think that the most typical number is 7 trustees.
Okay.
Some go to high as 9. I know a couple that are over 10, but I believe that 7 is probably the most typical. So the way that they've set theirs up, and they've put this in their bylaw, that there's a select board member, which is required. They have the town administrator or an appointee. Someone from the housing partnership, affordable housing partnership is on it. They have someone from their community preservation committee, someone from their planning board, and then they have 2 citizens at large positions.
Mm-hmm. And the housing partnership is the housing authority.
No,
True?
they're affordable housing partnership. It's a committee, not housing authority.
So it's interesting. There's nobody from the housing authority, and
Right.
Is that pretty typical?
It's pretty typical that the housing authority is not involved in the trust necessarily.
Because it's a conflict of interest, or?
I think it just depends on the relationship, and because the housing authority is on the CPC,
Right.
that sometimes it's a different housing board that's on the trust.
Right. So it's funny, a person who resigned from the housing authority just recently was also our representative on the CPC. So what I'm hearing you say is that the person who represents the housing authority, who's on the housing authority and represents the housing authority, the CPC, could be this CPC member and the trustees, for example?
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to, it's really up to the local community of how you structure your board. Is kind of why I'm going to give you another case study, which is Beverly, because it's all across the board, and some communities are really prescriptive about in their bylaw who should be on the trust board. We suggest to not be too prescriptive because it can be really limiting down the road, and oftentimes people who sit on boards sit on a lot of boards in town, and you want to make sure that they can get a quorum like you're experiencing tonight, the difficulty of getting a quorum when people are really busy and spread out. So the way that Brewster is really prescriptive, I would actually say that this is more prescriptive than I would suggest. Because of all these different committees that they're also, some of these are also on, they're on the CPC, the planning board's on the CPC, and the select board is on a lot of things. So this is pretty prescriptive, but it just depends on the local community and what you feel you need, and some of that comes down to politics in the community. And then
that's good to hear. It's not really prescribed by the state and
no.
There's flexibility there. Great, thank you.
So, and then powers can be modified or limited. We, again, encourage communities to not do this too much because you can detract from the point of creating an affordable housing trust. But in Brewster, they decided that allocations over $50,000 were subject to the select board's approval. So this is one way that they have modified their powers. Beverly created their trust in 2017, early 2017. And the first year, what I really appreciate about Beverly is their process. So they appointed their members. They actually only have 5 members. And it's the only community that I know of where a majority of the members are actually municipal employees. So their mayor sits on their board because he's the chief executive officer. Their director of planning and community development sits on the board. Their director of municipal finance, and they have 2 residents at large. So they appointed their members, and then they completed an updated housing plan. So they're already over 10% on the subsidized housing inventory. So it's not a housing production plan that's certified by the state. It's their own plan. They wanted to have the most current data of what's happening in the community, of who is struggling, of who is cost burdened in Beverly. So they completed their plan, and then they used that information to develop guidelines for how their trust was going to work, what they were interested in funding based on the needs that came up out of their housing plan. And then they wrote a NOFA, a notice of funds available, because they had some funds from inclusionary zoning. They had some in lieu of payment funds that they had available. They released the NOFA, and it was the next year, 2018, after they did this really thoughtful groundwork. It was in 2018 that they allocated their first funds. I'm so sorry about Ruby's constant whining.
He's doing great. You're both doing great. Don't worry. I love it.
So I went through the trustees, and then with their powers, they decided that they put a restriction that the conveyance of real property requires the mayor and the city council approval. So that was how they just shh, come on, sweetie. And then, so their funding has been inclusionary zoning at this point and possibly CPA down the road. So as we look at communities, it's not rocket science of what helps their trust to be successful. Shh. It's having money, a vision of what their purpose is, good leadership to move things forward, and then transparency in the community. So the great news is that we're seeing communities be really creative about how they're funding their affordable housing trust. And CPA, of all the trusts, we have about 118 affordable housing trusts in the state. And about 80% of them also have the Community Preservation Act. Oh my gosh.
So there's 300 some odd communities in the state. So I would have thought there would actually have been more than 100. That's,
No, so we have 351 communities, and a little bit over half of those have CPA, and then about 118 have a trust. So it's just in the last year, we've had maybe 5 communities create a trust. But it's still slowly inching up, just like with the CPA. Mm-hmm. So we have the blue hexagon. We have one community on the Cape has a cell phone tower, and their lease payments are directed to their housing trust. We have communities with inclusionary zoning, and in lieu of payments are directed to the trust. Like Swampscott is an example where it's written into their bylaw that any in lieu of payments go to the trust. We have communities that have transferred free cash, like Brookline and Truro are examples of that, and the other green hexagon special bylaw or ordinance payments that might exist in a community that can be directed to the trust. Tax title sales, the income from this could be directed to the trust. We have our first community, the municipal bond that has passed a municipal bond. Medfield created an affordable housing trust a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and they also passed a $1 million municipal bond. They don't have CPA, so they bonded against their operating, and that was to seed their affordable housing trust. We have our first community that had a tax override. Orleans created a trust a couple years ago, and also passed at their through town meeting and then at their election $275,000 permanent tax override to fund their trust, which is incredible because that means that every year they have that amount of money that they can count on. Donations are an option, especially in some of our very affluent communities. They're thinking about the possibility of donations, but donations could be not just cash, it could be a building or land as well. Developer negotiated fees, you just need to be really cautious about this to make sure that you're not crossing a line, but there are possibilities. We do have communities that have been able to receive some funds through in this manner. You likely know that there are communities trying to get a real estate transfer fee to fund affordable housing. Boston is one community doing that, and Nantucket. And then we have communities that are talking about short-term rental fees and marijuana tax, and if this could possibly, these resources could potentially be directed to the trust. I don't know of any that have done it yet, but they're talking about it. So what we suggest when you're getting started, and this feeds into your select board members' conversation, that we suggest that a trust start out determining your local need. So if your housing needs analysis or your housing production plan is old, like 2010 is very old in this case, we do suggest that you start with updating your housing plan so that you're really working with what's real, what's data can back up, instead of, when we talk about housing and affordable housing, it's oftentimes controversial, and people oftentimes will think, well, what can we best get through town meeting, or what will be the most amenable to the neighbors, to abutters? And that's really not a good way to use public resources and to do public policy. So we would suggest that you start by updating your plan. It's just, I'm sorry, it's getting to that point of the night. I should have tried to get care for her. And then that you, as a new trust, that you really update your data and that you work on setting priorities for the trust. The housing needs are so huge in all of our communities. I trust as a volunteer board. So spend a little bit of time of determining, based on the needs in the community, what are you going to focus your efforts on? And then you could create some benchmarks. This is not necessary, it's not required, but a community like Somerville, who are these people? A community like Somerville has determined that they want a portion of their funds to go towards the lowest income people. So they've set kind of a percentage of their funds that they want to go towards people earning under 50% of the area at median income. So you could do a benchmark like that if there was something that was a need that was particularly important for you at a certain time. You don't have to do that. And then you really need not only a dedicated chairperson, someone who can really help move things forward, but trustees who can really show up and participate. This really needs to be a working board. Affordable housing is very complex, as you know, as an housing authority members. And then the most successful trusts seem to have some kind of paid staff support, whether it's administrative or whether it's technical to help run a program. But most of the ones that are the most productive have some assistance. Affordable housing is really hard to do with just volunteers. Mm-hmm. And then if you do have different entities in town that focus on affordable housing or some pieces of affordable housing, it could be helpful to have a process where you're really figuring out who's doing what. So this is just a graph from Manchester's housing production plan, where they created their housing strategies on the left, and then they did shorter term, longer term, and then on the right, the lead entity, to help create some accountability for those different strategies, as well as to keep the boards from stepping on each other's toes as well.
This is my favorite slide so far.
So in some communities, it could include the housing authority, which isn't here, but it could include the housing authority. It could include a nonprofit that maybe does housing. It could include an affordable housing committee or an affordable housing partnership. They just had a few different entities, but it could be different per community. And then we talk a lot at MHP around transparency, because it just seems like in a lot of communities there probably isn't enough. So with affordable housing trusts, particularly something like affordable housing, where it's just can be so controversial, unfortunately, we really encourage you to not make it hard for people to understand what the trust is, who's on it, what the trust is doing, what are you funding. So report back where necessary, determine what boards you need to be reporting back to regularly. When you do fund something, promote that. Use a web page, social media if the community does that, but just don't make it seem like it's a private or secret thing. Be open about the work that you're doing. And then some trusts just want to have some funds in their account and accept applications and determine, like a CPC, determine whether they want to fund a project or not. We're seeing more affordable housing trusts be more initiators. So during this pandemic, a lot of housing trusts were actually the ones that stepped up to create emergency rent assistance programs or to fund emergency rent assistance programs. And we're seeing more housing trusts be a part of disposing of municipal land for affordable housing. So the land is usually not transferred to the trust, but the trust may be involved with the pre-development work, writing a request for proposals, reviewing those proposals, and really moving the project forward. So we're seeing more of that. And some are wanting to do both of these things. But we suggest that communities define your operating approach and be upfront about how you're going to operate in the community. And then I use the verbs of CPA, because a couple of years ago, which is acquire, create, preserve, support. If you're in CPA world, then you hear these terms likely. But because a few years ago, the trust statute was modified to allow all of the allowable activities under community housing for CPA are now allowable for a housing trust. They didn't before match up. So things that were under support under CPA technically were not formally allowed with the trust statute. And now everything that's allowed for CPA is allowed for a trust. So some of these examples that I'm going to show were funded directly from the CPC, but all of them could be funded by an affordable housing trust. So this is just an example of acquiring affordable housing. It was an existing apartment complex that I believe was permitted under Chapter 40B. So only a portion of the units were affordable. It's 124 units of rental housing. A nonprofit was able to acquire it in 2011 using some local funds, $500,000 of CPA funds. And now almost all of the units are affordable. They kept a few market rate because some households didn't qualify and they didn't want to displace anyone. But just an example of using local funds to acquire affordable housing. We have several affordable housing trusts that run some type of small-scale homeownership program, like in Leverett. So their trust uses CPA funds actually for this, but they have the Regional Housing and Redevelopment Authority manage the program. They set a maximum purchase price of $275,000 for someone who's interested in becoming a homeowner in Leverett and is a household earning up to 100% of the area median income. So these units are not considered affordable on the subsidized housing inventory because that would be a ceiling of 80% AMI. This is 100% AMI. But they offer up to 20% or $50,000 of the sale price. They add their own deed restriction to the unit so that it will stay affordable at 100% of the area at median income. But it's a way for them to invest in home ownership in the community. And there are several different models of this kind of buy down program or home ownership program across the state. We have many examples of local affordable housing trusts as well as CPCs helping to support the creation of affordable housing, like here in Yarmouth. This was an example of a site on Route 28 that was an old motor lodge, and you maybe are familiar with some of this sort of these old motor lodges on the Cape. But the community actually rezoned this section of Route 28 to allow for multifamily housing. And then this site was acquired privately by Dakota Partners, a private developer. And it now is 69 units of affordable apartments right on Route 28. They are affordable at 60% of the area at median income and 30% AMI. When you see the 60%, that means that low income housing tax credits are in the deal. And their local trust put in over $2 million into this project, which comes out to $30,000 per unit. So the developer actually received low-income housing tax credits in the first round, which is really unusual. And it's likely because the community rezoned the area for multifamily and the trust put in so much money to support the development.
Significant investment on multiple fronts.
Yep. A much smaller development in Western Mass, small community Goshen. They had some activists that just saw the need for affordable housing and they wanted to try some senior housing, and they partnered with their local nonprofit. They were able to, which was able to acquire an acquisition loan through CDAC. CDAC is a quasi-state agency as well that helps to finance affordable housing. And then it now is 10 units of senior rental housing. So it's single floor, one bedroom units, and their local CPC, their Community Preservation Committee, which could be a trust, put in $130,000. So not that much money, but they're a small community. And now they have 10 units of affordable housing, which is actually a really nice size project for a community as tiny as Goshen. But trying to show that communities are finding ways to add affordable housing to their stock. And then we have many examples of reusing existing buildings for affordable housing. And sometimes there's a historic component, not always. But the Shoe Shop Place in Middleborough, it had been a shoe factory. It's now, after a partnership between two nonprofits, 25 units of rental housing. Stevens Corner was a nursing home that a nonprofit was able to acquire, and it now is 42 units of family, non-age restricted rental housing. And then there are many examples of old schools being reused as either market rate or affordable housing. This particular example in Rockport is senior housing, age-restricted housing, 31 units of apartments. So, sometimes in some communities, this is a less controversial way to add affordable housing than new construction. So, and sometimes there is a historic component. So sometimes if CPA funds are an option, then it could be on two fronts, on affordable housing as well as historic. And then under preserve, we often think of preserve affordable housing as preserving affordable restrictions, because many affordable restrictions are actually set to expire based on the financing that's used for the project. So this was a development in Amherst. It still is there, 204 units. And 41 units had been deed restricted, but they were coming up. The restrictions were set to expire. And the owner was not interested in extending them. And the community was really anxious about this because I'm sure you know the Amherst rental market is heavily impacted by the universities, and they don't have near enough affordable rental housing. So they were concerned about losing these 41 units, and they engaged MHP. My colleague who worked for MHP, she lived out there, she's now retired. She helped them start to think through what could be an option, and they engaged a different developer, Beacon Communities, who has lots of experience in this realm. And they actually negotiated with the previous owner to buy it, and the community bonded $1.25 million of CPA funds to support the deal. And now these 41 units are affordable in perpetuity. So a trust wouldn't be able to bond because they don't have the same kind of income as CPC. So if Southampton did create an affordable housing trust and there was this kind of a situation, the CPC would likely need to be engaged. If you needed to do a big enough, a huge, large chunk of funds to make the deal happen, the CPC would likely need to be engaged because the trust just is likely not, it's just not going to have the same kind of income. And then support. Historically, we have seen pre-development work, particularly on municipal sites, that funds could be used to do that, or funds could be used for housing plans. Rent assistance is explicitly in the CPA statute. And I'm going to wrap up because she's starting to lose it. But just three things to really consider is we suggest that you really consider your local infrastructure. Be really clear on the needs and the resources locally so that you're not duplicating anything, but that you're adding value if you decide to create a trust. That your trustees really develop goals that reflect identified needs, because it's so easy to create housing policy based on bias and assumptions or anecdotes versus the data for community-wide. And then to be really real about your capacity as a volunteer board, that the needs are great. Try to pick a few things, 2 or 3 things to really focus on try to do well. And then we have a lot of online resources, the updated Housing Trust Guidebook, Data Town with all kinds of data for your community and surrounding communities, and the Housing Toolbox as well. And then, of course, I am happy to be a resource as you're moving forward. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I am, I know I just talked a lot. And I'm even sweating because she's making me work here. But are there any questions that I can help you with? I can send the PDF to Jim so that you can post it, you can have it.
Please.
Okay,
Please.
she sees herself. But are there
Well,
questions?
we got a future member here. She's very willing to vocalize.
Remember everywhere.
You did a great job, both of you, Ruby and Shelley. Thank you. Do folks have questions? I know I have at least one, but Janet and Sierra is still officially a guest, but do you have questions for Shelley?
No, I think she covered a lot. I guess, is it unusual that a housing trust starts with the housing authority driving this initiative?
It is not, it's not common, but it's not unheard of, but it's not common.
Because I guess we try to figure out what is our mission, and then what would that mission be? And, I don't know who's going to get a housing trust in front of the town if it's not the housing authority here in Southampton, I guess. But
well, Wellfleet is an example of their housing authority is really driving a lot of their housing work. And so I've been speaking with them about a housing trust as well. So that is one example, but it's not common.
mm-hmm. Okay.
Sierra, do you have any questions?
No, I don't think so. Nothing immediate.
Okay. Well, I have one question, Shelley. First of all, again, I can't thank you enough for being patient and then providing this education and presentation and juggling Ruby and doing it all. You're like Supermom. Thank you. It's really extraordinary.
Yeah, it was a really, really interesting and good presentation, and an
Yes.
amazing ability to keep it together and also take care of a baby at the same time. And
Multitasking, yes.
sound like you know what the heck you're talking about.
Well done. Well done. My question for you, I just want to make sure I heard what I thought you say is, and because it will definitely reorient me, because as chair of the Housing Authority, one of the things I've been trying to do is assess the politics in town and trying to approach different strategies. The Housing Trust is but one, and trying to work with different boards in town to do what I see is probably the least politically, can get us a win right away. But what I heard you say is it's really important to focus on the needs first. Start with the needs and then build the case around that rather than trying to build toward an easy win necessarily. Did I hear that correctly?
Well, why we say start with the needs is because we just have seen in so many communities that policy is created based on what people think they can get through town meeting. And that's can be really problematic because the assumptions in most of our communities that are single family home ownership communities is that the need is, there's such an assumption that what they can get through town meeting is affordable home ownership that's single family housing. And that's not a practical way to build affordable housing. Like, you really need to allow multifamily housing. In most communities, the need is more rental housing. So we just really say that communities should understand the data, because it's not going to convince everyone, but at least, you're really responding to the needs in the market and not just assumptions. So that's why we say that. At the same time, a community like Medway, as they were creating their affordable housing trust, they intentionally worked with Habitat for Humanity on a single homeownership unit. And they promoted it and they encouraged people in the community to be part of the build. And it was how they did it, like a quick win, and they were building momentum at the same time that they were creating this affordable housing trust. So I don't think it necessarily has to be one or the other, but we just say start with the data, because people will so often say they just want home ownership or they just want senior housing, but oftentimes it's family rental housing that's necessary. So that's just why we say start with data.
Because I think what I've learned is that you can, and Goshen was a good example, I think, was that we can say we need senior housing, but once we build it, it doesn't necessarily address the people in Southampton. And maybe, so I mean, I'm like, well, then that's not necessarily what we need. So we don't want to build senior housing for people outside. We want to help people stay in their homes. How do we best do that? The people have been here for 50 years and maybe can't afford the taxes anymore, or, you know, so I don't know what that answer is, but.
It could be multiple, right, right.
Well, you know, Goshen, I think what is a fair point about Goshen is that our communities oftentimes have the assumption that what people in the community want is affordable, deed-restricted senior housing. And what you have in Goshen is that very few Goshen residents even applied. And then there has to be a lottery. So you can't just restrict it to your community because of fair housing laws. But the point is that I don't even think they had that many people apply in the community because it was an assumption that they made.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had spoken with Paul from Hilltown CDC about that project afterwards. So that was he kind of gave us the good, the bad, and the ugly part of it. So.
But to Shelley's point, I know I've been making assumptions because you hear testimony of a few people and you look around and you envision demographics, but you really need to grab the data. So we recently, did a town survey that was very helpful, that we had a DLTA grant to help support our master plan implementation. But to your point, updating our housing action plan, which is 10 years old, there's data, Okay. Well, again, Supermom, where's your cape? I don't know, but thank you very much for taking the time and the patience to present to us. I definitely would love to receive that PDF because I can share it with everyone, including one member who expressed, strong interest that he wants to really champion the effort of creating a town trust. He wasn't able to come tonight. So I'm happy to share with him. So yes, that PDF, if you could email it to me, that'd be great. And the fact that you're available ongoing, you might regret that, but that's helpful too.
I'm actually going to take off because she's really losing it. But so I will send you the PDF for later tonight. Okay.
Thank you very much. And then there were three of us.
Yes.
Can I add something while we're on this housing trust topic? Last month, you guys sent me off to do a little research on funding for the administrative position in the housing trust. Do you have time to just real quick tell you what I found out? Like 30 seconds?
Absolutely. I'm all ears.
Okay. So while there are no actual grants to support that kind of thing or to support the creation of a housing trust, like to begin with, you can actually fund the administrative position out of the housing trust funds. So basically, when you create the action plan, or when we update the action plan, the housing authority gets to make the rules of how the funding and the trust can be spent. So you, upon creating this, would be like, and this much money is going to be dedicated toward administrative and technical support. And then we just fund it out of the general. Mm-hmm. And, some of the funding that comes in for housing trust, like a grant that's specifically for development, could not be used for that. But the other funding that's come in, CPA, or, maybe it's maybe not the CPA, but maybe like all these other things you could get, like a general fund, developer fees, marijuana tax fees could be used to cover the administrative position.
So that's pretty consistent to what Shelley just described. Is you build your housing trust and you create the the requirements, whatever, that you kind of can make your own rules, and what you're saying reinforces that. Yeah. That's good to know, because I think, to her point, this is going to be a long slog, and it's really hard with a volunteer board. I struggle at times with trying to get these things done and manage, my full-time job. And we're all in the same, have different stressors on us. And the consistency of someone who's paid to do this, board members, as we're learning, come and go. Any of us could, So I like that idea of paying someone to own it. It seems
it's just that during the creation and of the whole action plan, which is a whole bunch of the work, you don't get that person until you've actually created the trust.
Right. Well, that's the reason, hopefully, if we can put in a DLTA grant, which I think we can, minimally, I think we can push for one for support in updating our housing action plan. That's that won't be a paid someone to do that, but that would essentially be a paid consultant to help us, navigate that and give us some juice to it. I found when we had, when the town was awarded the grant for the master plan implementation, and Ken Comia from PVPC joined us, it made a world of difference. Having someone there who had that role as a consultant and knew what they were doing and had some, it made a big difference. So it's kind of like a bridge to that paid person. You have this consultant.
Yes, that's cool.
Okay. I'm going to jump back to our agenda. So the housing trust creation, our next steps, I think, I'll share the PDF, but I think it's really about hoping to get this housing action plan updated, because the next steps for a housing trust seem to be coming up with, data. I heard that pretty loud and clear.
Yeah, and I think the action plan has to say, like, one of our actions is we're going to create a housing trust, which it didn't look like in the old version it says.
I don't think so.
I mean, it was like an action item one of the recommendations, but it did kind of say that's what we're going to do. But yeah, so.
Good point. Okay, the other items on the agenda. Janet, no offense, but I think we're going to punt again looking at the town lots.
Well, I was going to recommend that because with just two of us and Sarah will be hopefully on soon. And I don't know whether I was going to suggest, do you want to try to reschedule this meetings or just wait another month, or what would be the best to do? Because Brian obviously was buried at work, and I don't know what he does, but he was like, I meant to send you guys an email and I'm so sorry. And I'm like swamped, and I'm like, bye, Brian, so I took enough of your time. Goodbye. And, I mean, if we can get Sierra on board, if she still wants to be part of us.
Yeah, so I did all my stuff. I sent the Southampton volunteer application to the town clerk. Or who was it? No, not the town clerk, the one guy who works for the town, Ed. And I also sent my cover letter and resume to those two guys at the state level who need to do the state appointment. So just waiting to hear back at this point.
Okay.
So we have an option now that we have an opening of waiting on the state to come back to us, or putting Sierra in front of the select board to fill that seat till May. But while we wait, or whatever,
I mean, we can't really decide or vote on that tonight because we don't have a quorum, but my opinion is she's already started the process, and I think it'd actually be good to have someone on who's, quote, appointed by the state, and we don't keep trying to fill that. And we can pursue replacing Chuck going forward, we still may. Because I think we can operate with Sierra, we can operate even if we don't replace Chuck, because if I'm not mistaken, that replacement's only temporary until the town election. Yeah.
But I don't know how long it's going to take the state to get Sierra approved.
Good point.
Either. So that's my own. So we're going to be down two people from taking votes.
Well, if Charlie's not leaving till March, maybe we could wait till next month to decide. And if I still haven't heard from the state, I'll let you guys know, and you could reassess.
I mean, his date is March 1st, but he didn't come to today's meeting.
Oh,
so.
yeah.
But I think it's also true that, with Brian, myself, Janet, and Brian, that's three. That's a quorum.
Yes.
So tonight we're impotent, but not necessarily going forward.
And that's the first time Brian's not been here, and that's going to happen. But there's a CPC meeting on Wednesday, and Chuck is the liaison, and if I'm not so sure he's gonna be there, but we can't nominate somebody and vote on them because we don't have a quorum. So we're in a catch-22 here.
We are, and I don't know. I don't get the sense that, CPC is going to fall apart if they don't have a housing authority rep, for
No, but he is a voting member, and for them to reach a quorum too, we have a responsibility for that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, moving forward. So, I mean, yes, it's not probably critical from the housing perspective, but if they're voting members, we have to just make sure we fill it eventually.
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair. I mean, we could wax eloquently about this all night, but this is just the struggles we're having in town with getting enough people to invest. And
Yeah. No, I just wanted to make sure you were aware that there was a CPC meeting, so.
I wasn't aware that there was this Wednesday, and to your point, I wasn't fully cognizant, so I appreciate it, Janet, that, they're a voting member and it affects their board too, and
Yeah, that's all.
that's valid, yeah.
And I don't believe there's been representation there for a few meetings.
Mhm.
Not that they've had many in the last couple of months, but.
Right, they don't
Prior
meet
to that.
regularly like we do. They meet as needed, as I'm correct.
Well, it's pretty much monthly, except around December, January. I think they kind of, usually before the town meeting stuff is the important stuff. And as they get proposals from outside groups and so on and so forth. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, Francine's on it. So that's why I knew there was a meeting. That's the only reason I knew. So, but since we don't have a quorum, we can't do anything about it anyway. So, unless Chuck wants to go, but we can always ask him to. He won't be at our next meeting though, so.
I don't mind, calling him or sending him an email and see if he's going to go.
Yeah,
Just remind him.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll drop him an email.
because I'm not sure he got the email the last time from Virginia. And I don't know if they have a wrong email address, but that's whatever.
Mhm. Well, on the agenda, I can report back an update on the CARES Act funding distribution if you. So,
Right? Yes.
yeah, so Community Action actually sent, it's not an MOU, it's like a contract almost, and they sent me a template because I was looking for a template from Ed. What have you used for MOUs for others? And it actually seemed easier that if we, rather than having him look, maybe we don't have something in town to provide him with. And that's when Jenna from Community Action said, we actually use a contract, not an MOU. She sent me a template, I think from Amherst. So I sent that to Ed, and Ed was going to look at it this weekend and let me know. But he seemed, very open to that. I haven't received an email from him yet today, but it's only Monday. It was kind of chaos with the snow.
And town hall is closed today
So,
because of the snow. So, yeah.
right. But anyway, I guess what I'm not articulating it well. I remain optimistic that, we can get something done there. I'm frankly not sure if there's going to be much of a demand because, again, I think I reported to this forum that, the town of Amherst is a much bigger town and they're not spending the amount of money they budgeted because there's already been extra CARES Act funding put into RAFT, for example, which is a state rental subsidy program. And that's the beauty of having these funds managed by someone like Community Action. They start with what's available through the state RAFT and whatnot. They work with the client. Maybe they're not eligible, maybe they need more that's available, and that's where the local subsidy that we would provide through CARES Act funding would come into play.
Okay. I mean, but if we help one family,
Right. I think we should definitely set it up regardless of whether we're going to spend the $6,000 budget or not. To your point, Janet, if one family is helped, it's worth it.
yeah.
So I'm going to continue to pursue it with Ed.
Great.
And I appreciate your help, Janet, in facilitating that.
Yeah, they're not, the town server is not Hotmail friendly, apparently. And
Okay.
that, other things, because I saw Judy's response to you about the annual the annual report. I don't know when, and so I forwarded it to you, I think, because she couldn't, I don't know, it kept bouncing back when she sent it.
That's unfortunately something that didn't get done.
Just have to modify last year's, right? Is it, I mean, when's the deadline on that?
I'm gonna, I'm blanking. I'm going to look that up, but it's not done at this moment. But yeah, there's probably not much to say, and I did it last year, so I can probably massage it some.
Okay. Yeah. Can I ask a question about the DLTA grant?
Sure.
I mean, what do you need from us?
So
we have a grant expert that's not on the authority yet, but.
So honestly,
not that I'm throwing you under the bus here or anything. Just language sometimes is a big deal.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was given a good template, and I think to me, and I don't know if we can decide this without a vote, we don't have a quorum, but to me, what I plan to do is I'm happy to reach out to Paul and say, this is what we're dealing with, are you willing to sign off? And I believe that we should go for as much as we can. So not only, a DLTA asks that includes, a housing action plan update, but, technical assistance with, looking at zoning overlays and zoning trade. They call it, I like the term they use, starter home zoning. I've been looking for a term, and I like that term because starter home would also work well for elderly folks who are downsizing. So, include that. And if it just doesn't work for the planning board or for him to sign off on that piece of it, then, pull it back to just housing action plan consultation and go through the select board.
Yeah, I mean,
And find that out within the next week, me finding that out from Paul. And then, the actual language, I was going to just basically use what I was given to me from last year's. And I, certainly, Sierra, I would welcome your help with that. My writing skills are poor.
Sure.
And to create, again, I love the fact that, brevities, I have this much experience in grant writing, but I've seen, federal grants is pages and pages and check these boxes. And it's oh my God, this looked actually quite simple.
Yeah.
They're really trying to do that these days. You see the federal government trying with their whole paperwork burden statements, and they're this should take you 6 hours. But, the smaller organizations are really able to actually sort of cut that down and make things easier for people.
No, that's good.
If you want to, send me a draft, I'll edit it. I'll look at it. I'll give you suggestions. Happy to.
Yeah. I mean, this all has to come together this week, essentially, because it's due, the 12th or whatever.
12th, yeah.
A week from Friday, right?
Yeah, so if you send me something and give me a date, be it's Thursday, get this to me by Sunday, I can work that out for sure.
Perfect. Okay. All right, folks. Other things... I'm looking at the agenda, and there's some things we just really not without a quorum,
Yeah, and it's I went to the local initiative program webinar this week, but to go through that without Brian, I think is kind of repeating it again next meeting. So since it's already 7:15 or 7:17 or whatever, maybe we could just go over that. You didn't get a chance to go that one, Jim. Middle of the day stuff.
Right. And I really liked it. I went to one a couple months ago, but I happened to have the vacation week that week. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, this one was more interesting than the last one. And I also attended a 1 hour webinar on Community One Stop. that was that same Wednesday morning, which is a grant, kind of about the one-stop grants for the state. So, and just also, we just got an update from KP Law on the new initiative for reducing the voting from 2/3 down to, simple majority. And I just got it because I have someone I know on the select board upstairs. So I will forward that to you. So I'm sure it's coming, but so I'll send that forward,
Sure, you can send it to the whole group.
Yeah, no, I will send it to the whole group.
Yeah, perfect.
So answers all the questions that Lindsay answered in one sentence. KP Law has about 3 pages,
Well,
and Lindsay's happy to come if we have a meeting sometime and you'd like her to come to speak as our guest. She's open to doing that. So that's Lindsay Sabadosa. Yeah,
that's great. She's certainly been responsive.
Yeah.
Helpful. I appreciate that.
Yeah, she's pretty quick. It took her, I think, 2 days this time. I was a little disappointed. No, she's great. She's amazing. So.
Okay. So do we have a sense where we're going next? We've got some very short-term goals for this week. To your question, Janet, should we try to meet before, the first Monday of March?
I just threw it out there. I mean, maybe we just keep it on schedule and I don't know if Brian's job is related to the storm and that's why he was so buried today, or I forget. I don't know what his line of work is. So.
Well, I know he told me when I met with him that he used to be a journalist.
Right. That I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't think that's what he's doing now.
Journalist turned snowplow driver.
Either that or some electrical company that's afraid they're going to go out of, lose electricity tonight. And so who knows, but okay. And then I can report on the training that I went through. And I don't know if there's another one this month or not. I'll have to check.
Yeah, I wish I could go. I do have a lunch hour, but it's only a half hour. So it's not like my hands are completely tied by my job, but I'm very careful because, we all took the ethics training and boundaries, and I have similar, as you can imagine, ethics requirements that I take for the federal government. And as someone who's paid by your tax dollars, I'm extremely bordering paranoid about ever crossing these boundaries. So it's just the way it is.
What is your job, Jim?
I work for the VA in their homeless program.
Oh, cool. Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So are you working from home usually?
Yes, mostly. Okay. Yeah. Tomorrow I'm going to try to go in. We'll see what happens. We have the OIG is in town. Yay. So it's not them, it's Joint Commission or somebody else is always coming in, turning over things. Anyway, I digress. So, Janet, I have a question for you. I don't know if you have an answer, but since this is not like an official meeting with a quorum, we're voting on things, will we have minutes, and do we vote on minutes of a meeting that didn't take place, or how does that work?
I'll record our discussions. There were no motions, nothing was passed, but yeah, we should, I don't have a problem putting an outline, a little bit of summary together of what Shelley did. And
there was a lot of good education tonight. I think it'd be nice that it be part of the public record, even if we didn't vote on anything.
Well, if she sends you that, and since I can't approve these minutes, I can't post the last presentation, but until I get the minutes approved, but I'll try to remember to attach them to the date of the meeting so that anybody, can go to MyTownGov and see that. So, okay.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
All right. Can we vote to adjourn?
I don't even think we can vote to adjourn.
Forever.
Certainly, I guess we have to set our next meeting day. Well, we can assume it's going to be the first Monday in March, right? Which
That's
would
what
be
we
the
stated.
first,
Yeah, yeah.
6 p.m. I think that's fair. And
Is it March 1st? Is that our next, is that?
it is because, everything repeats.
Oh, yeah, March
It's
1st,
not
yeah.
leap year.
So,
But Sierra, hopefully we'll have something by March 1st. You'll be able to report that you are a member and the state will have stamped you and all that. And if not, then to Janet's point, maybe we need to reassess how to proceed.
All right. I'll let you guys know if I hear from them, or maybe you'll hear before I do. I don't know.
yeah, even if we slide her in for 2 months and then it comes and we slide her out to the other. So at least she has the ability to vote on whatever, if it's, but I don't have a clue how long it takes the state.
Yeah. Anyway.
You would think something like this, they would expedite,
Yeah, right. Get in line, right? So
Right.
was nice seeing everybody.
Yeah.
On the non-meeting that we had.
It's just been a chaotic day.
Yeah, we didn't cancel it, so I will post something. We will post something. And I'll just say that we adjourned at 7:24, so I have.
Yeah, in the nonprofit board world, at least, a meeting without a quorum is still a meeting in every other sense of the word, other than voting on anything.
Yeah,
So you still take minutes and you still record it as a meeting that happened.
Yeah.
In nonprofit stuff, I don't know. Municipal is always been different.
Good. Yep.
I like that. I think
You just can't do anything. We can just talk and listen.
Yeah.
Which is not bad.
Yeah. Appreciate the dedication, everybody.
All right. I'm going to leave now.
We're all leaving now. We're not voting on it. We're just leaving.
Bye. Nice seeing you guys.
Okay, good to see
Seeing
you.
you all.
See you next
Bye,
time.
Jim.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.